but I also performed an aircrew mission, and I would also operate
pew pews
on the side in order to provide suppressing fire. I have been involved in one actual crash. Pilot announced to the rest of the crew, "Hey, look, we're having trouble. We're going to go down." Basically, I responded with, "Hey, raise your hand if you haven't been in a helicopter crash," and we all just kind of laughed. Rotary wing aircraft are designed to do one thing and one thing only, and that's
delete
the people who ride inside of them. They're not very safe aircraft to fly in to begin with, but they do such an amazing job at what they specialize in, and that's getting in tight spaces.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Red Dawn Daily with your host, me, Dawn Marie. Today, I'm going to be interviewing a friend of mine who's an aviation expert, and we're going to be covering the plane and helicopter crash in DC. Thank you so much, Jason, for agreeing to come on the show today. Please go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's my pleasure to come on. Me and you, we've worked together for several years on a different channel, a different style of show. Those of you who may know who I am, I was once called Aircraft Sparky. Today I go by my actual name, Jason. I'm starting a new venture on YouTube called Lesson 3 Entertainment, where we will focus on actually changing the culture, things like that. We'll be doing that through music, through gaming, comedy. I'm a U.S. military vet from both the Air Force and then the Army. I've worked in aviation throughout my entire adult career. I am currently an instructor for aircraft maintenance. I am familiar with operations procedures when it comes to flight planning and things like that, even some air traffic control issues. So today's topic is right in my wheelhouse of expertise on a professional level, and I'm more than happy to share that information with you. That way we can all be better informed.
I was wondering if you could tell the audience a little bit more about what you did when you were on the helicopters.
So when I was working helicopters with the Army, I ran a dual position where I would perform inspections on the airframe and structures, doing what is called non-destructive inspection, using things like X-ray and ultrasound to find cracks, weak spots within the structure. That was my ground crew mission, but I also performed an air crew mission where I would do what they called scanning, and I would also operate guns on the side in order to provide suppressing fire and things like that in order to protect the people who rode on board.
What is scanning, I guess?
Scanning is when you're looking around at the terrain that you're flying around. You're looking for things like power lines. You're looking for high trees. You're looking for buildings. You're looking at any other aircraft that could be around. You could find missiles coming at you and things like that, and you would call it out to the pilot. That way they could do evasive maneuvers in order to avoid collision, things like that. But yeah, it's basically just looking outside of the aircraft and looking for any potential threats to the aircraft itself. I've looked over the 2 videos that have been put out there so far, and I don't even believe that the air crew noticed the plane coming at them. Just looking at how the operation of the aircraft were. I don't know if the passenger airliner happened to see them either. I know when it comes to the ability to see things on a helicopter, there's a reason why we have people that are dedicated to scanning, looking around, making sure that, all the obstacles are accounted for and things. But really the biggest failure here was the fact that the Army pilot, the helicopter pilot, refused to pay attention to their operational ceiling limitations. They were in that corridor of flight. They are not allowed to fly over 200 feet. The collision happened around 350 feet of altitude, meaning that helicopter was in the wrong place. So their ability to see the aircraft, supposedly from what I have read and from people that I've talked to, the pilot was wearing night vision goggles or NVGs, which flying around a city at night with NVGs, you actually lose a lot of your night vision because of the amplification of other light sources. So I even question the fact that if the pilot happened to see the aircraft that was bearing down on them at that time.
And I think that is probably the number one question of lay people like myself. When we see the video, the impact video, I think we're all astounded and we don't understand how could you not see the plane. Like
Well,
that's baffling for
so there's a
somebody.
lot of things going on while you're flying. I mean, pilots don't really look out the window as much as you would think. They spend a lot of time staring at their gauges. In fact, many pilots will do what they call a sector scanning type type of viewing. So they may start looking over their left shoulder, moving forward right, going down to their panels, back towards the right, and they'll do this the entire time, scanning a certain sector, just making sure that they are keeping track of their instruments, they're keeping track of their altitude, they're keeping track of the temperature of the air, um, the whole time while seeing where they're going, looking at their map, making sure that they're navigating properly, looking for obstructions. It's quite a busy thing flying a helicopter. It really is.
Oh wow, I had no idea that any of
Yeah.
that was going on. Did you see that? I think they said that they were short staffed on the helicopter.
Well, no, it's not that they were short staffed. So traditionally, when you're flying a Black Hawk, you're gonna have a pilot, a co-pilot, a crew chief, and usually one extra person. So you would have a scanner on either side of the aircraft. This time they were only flying with a crew chief and two pilots, the pilot and the co. It was a captain. It was a U.S. Army captain was in command of the helicopter, and a CW2 um, Chief Warrant Officer 2 was in the co-pilot seat, and there was an enlisted man, a crew chief, in the back.
Do you think that there's a possibility then that this crash or midair collision could have been avoided if they had had the additional scanner so they're looking at both sides?
This crash would have been 100% avoided had the pilots actually followed the the limitations, the altitude limitations in that corridor of flight. They violated the altitude restriction. They are the ones they're the actual cause of this incident.
Do you know how something like that might happen? Like, why would you, if you're only supposed to be at 200 feet, why would you be up like at
Uh,
350 or 400?
so the most generous thing that you can give is, oh, maybe there was an equipment malfunction. The problem is with that, an altimeter being off by 150 feet is questionable. Normally, anything over anything over 2 feet of difference, and that can be tested and calibrated on the ground, will immediately, yeah, that will ground the aircraft. But there's backup altimeters. There's backup ways to determine your altitude. These were the pilots just not really caring about the restrictions that were in place. And I'm not trying to demonize the pilots themselves, but when you fly at lower altitudes, there's a lot more things to be concerned with. I would never want to fly. I never wanted to fly low level at all in helicopters. I would always rather fly over 1,000 feet. That way, if there was a problem, we could auto rotate out of it. Because if an emergency happens at a lower altitude, you can't just recover. You're just gonna crash and die. This may have been a safety concern that these pilots were taking into consideration. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of ego when it comes to military aviation. They could have been just like, oh well, we don't see any threat, blah blah blah, and we're just going to do this. I'll take the SWAC. You can hit me with the trouble afterwards, but right now I'm concerned with the safety of my crew and my aircraft at this moment. I mean, that could be a thing, but I don't know if it's an ego thing or what motivated them to violate that restriction on altitude. If I was a pilot in that situation, I would not be happy flying at 200 feet above the ground. I would want to fly a little bit higher. That would be what would be in back of my mind as an air crew member. But just generally disregarding that restriction, especially in an approach area for Reagan International Airport, that really doesn't make much sense.
Would the other people on the helicopter know that they were up too high, or is
Well,
that just
the co-pilot would, because the co-pilot sees the same gauge as the pilot does. But the crew chief in the back, I mean, he was just doing standard scanning duties. And if there was any type of equipment that needed to be operated in the back of the helicopter, that would be his responsibility to take care of.
Oh, okay. So he might not have even been scanning. He could have been doing something else, like
Yeah, yeah. If they were doing like some type of practice, like operating a winch, like if you were going to simulate retrieving someone from the ground without having to land, you would lower a winch down and wait for that person to connect, and you could raise them up and bring them onto the helicopter.
oh, okay. Wow. So maybe then a fourth person could have seen the
Probably not.
what? Oh,
No, the way the helicopter was facing when it hit the when the commercial jet hit them. Um, I don't know if a scanner would have been able to see it coming out from the side. This was almost a head-on collision.
oh, okay. I guess I also don't understand like what the visibility is even like, or how what you can see from what angle on any kind on any kind of helicopter.
The visibility from the front of the Black Hawk, you can see straight ahead, but you can't see straight ahead and up more than 8 degrees, 12 degrees above. So it's there's a blind spot. Yeah.
Wow, I guess. Oh, wow. So that's different from like if you were gonna, they do those romantic helicopter rides where you're up and the
Well,
helicopter
yeah,
tours.
yeah,
I guess
yeah.
that's what I
So,
think of. When you're just completely like that's
well,
really the only thing I think of when I think of a helicopter. I'm like, why can't they see that? But you're
even
saying
with the
that's not.
helicopter tours, though, you can't see out the front because they usually have a solid wall. You can only see out the side windows.
Oh, I've never been on one. I guess in my mind there's glass everywhere, and I'm not even
No.
thinking about a military helicopter. I'm sorry, this is just like not my field at all. That's why I
Yeah.
have you here. You can
There you
explain
go.
this
There
to
you
me.
go. Too easy.
Yeah. Wow. Now I was going to ask you about what if any role the air traffic controllers may have had in the situation, because I saw an interview with a woman who said that she was a helicopter pilot, and that instead of just asking if they had visual confirmation, that the air traffic controller should have been more specific and said like at your 5 o'clock or something like that, to not because other people think that they were giving visual confirmation of some other plane, but to get that specific 5 o'clock. Um,
Well, okay. So if you were traveling in a certain direction, an air
mhm,
traffic controller can actually tell you your relative location of an obstacle or another aircraft.
mhm.
But if they're hovering, that would be a different situation unless they knew the bearing at which the nose of the helicopter was pointing to. There's a lot of questionable things that are coming out of the ATC right now. Currently, as far as what I understand, is that there was supposed to be 2 people watching that sector of airspace at the time, but one of them became sick, went ill,
Mhm.
and decided to go home, leaving one person in control of this sector of airspace. Um, the the airspace around Washington D.C., you can imagine is going to be a little congested, especially considering not only do you have D.C. in the area, but you have Baltimore very close. So there's a lot of air traffic coming in and out of your sector. For one person to be able to keep um, pinpoint accuracy of everything going on in their area of airspace, which is going to be about 50 to 100 square miles at a time. So keeping 100% accuracy for one person is not going to say impossible, but it's improbable. If that controller was the only one controlling that sector of airspace at the time, you have to give them a little bit of grace and understanding. They're looking at a screen that doesn't show shapes of airplanes. It shows a dot and a flight number, and it'll give you an altitude next to it. May give you, depending on the year of the software. It may tell you their airspeed. It should tell them what heading they're traveling at. But there's a lot of information that could be filtered out or put on that screen. And I don't know, different controllers will watch different things depending on what they're doing with that specific aircraft, and they can toggle all this stuff on and off.
You are saying then that this air traffic controller was put almost in an impossible situation?
No, just a deal that the level of detail that people expect air traffic controllers to be able to operate at, I think it is unfair to the controller themselves. There's a reason why we usually have redundant systems,
Mhm.
and it's that if that redundancy fails, then can you really blame the leftover person? The redundancy being the other person that should have been there. But employees get sick. It does happen. They could have had an emergency with their family. I'm not blaming the controllers because at the end of the day, it is the pilot's responsibility to navigate their aircraft and ensure the safety of their aircraft and their air crew and their
Do you
passengers if they have any.
do you think that to help prevent things like this from in the future, that instead of only being staffed with 2 people, perhaps they should have 3 air traffic controllers in case somebody does get sick?
Okay, so we look at the history of aviation within America. Um, the actual amount of incidents that have happened due to air traffic control failures are actually quite small. Since the Ronald Reagan administration greatly overhauled air traffic control following the strike, and I believe it was 82, maybe I don't remember the year. Don't quote me on that, but when Ronald Reagan put down the government workers' ability to strike, they actually they looked at the complaints going on by the air traffic controllers, and several modifications and procedures and things like that changed for air traffic control. Since that time, we have had minimal issues from air traffic control caused incidences. The majority of incidences are traditionally pilots not following the rules, regulations, and laws governing the operation of the equipment of which you're doing. In this case, in the case of the midair collision in DC, this was a pilot not following altitude restrictions within the flight path of landing aircraft coming into Ronald Reagan International Airport. This is a pilot's fault. This is you can say ATC should have been able to go, hey, you're running higher, you're flying at a higher altitude. From what I can see, there were warnings given out. Um, you were flying above the restricted altitude ceiling, and you are endangering yourself and other aircraft. And we don't. The helicopter reported that they didn't see anything, and I think it was 12 seconds before the incident. They were warned about their altitude. They remained there. That is the
Wow.
helicopter's fault. That is United States Army's fault.
Do you have any suggestions as to maybe what we could do in the future to prevent something like this from happening again?
It's very simple. Military aviation or civilian aviation, it doesn't matter. You have to when pilots break these restrictions, they need to be punished. It is not your traditional air crew that is not in control of the aircraft that is violating these rules. It is the pilots, and a lot of, especially like in the military, they don't want to punish the pilots because they spend so much money training these individuals to operate these pieces of equipment. You think about it, a pilot's going to spend a year to 2 years in flight school before they even get to do the initial flights in the aircraft that they're going to be assigned to in the military. So you're talking 1,000, 2,000 hours of flight, which the pilot, the pilot of the aircraft reportedly had about 1,000 hours of flight in a Black Hawk. A lot of people will go, that's not a lot of time in helicopters. That's an age. That is a long time. The secondary pilot, the co-pilot, had about 500 hours reportedly. That's about a year and a half on helicopters because they don't fly long missions. If you look at the people who fly with commercial airliners, um, they're going to spend about they're going to do about 12 to 16-hour days with maybe 12 to 10 hours flying, actually flying. So any day they fly, you can figure they're getting 10 hours of flight time with that aircraft, where a helicopter may only fly 3 to 4 hours max because of fuel requirements. These planes don't fly as fast, so they can't cover as much of a distance. Um, but still, a 3 hour flight in a helicopter is actually quite freaking long. It's not a comfortable ride.
How much time or how much warning would it take for that helicopter to get out of the way of an
It,
incoming of an incoming?
within the 12 seconds between ATC giving them a warning about them being within the path of an aircraft and the
Mhm.
actual collision, they could have dropped all the way to the ground. They could have crashed to the ground without a problem. They could have gotten out of the way of the aircraft by lowering their altitude, getting below the altitude threshold. Um, they had plenty of time between that. Um, if they were sitting there jabbering with ATC about we don't see anything, well, it's night. You're wearing NVGs. You're not going to see everything, especially around a well lit city area. I listen to your air traffic controllers and do your job right, pilots. This is completely a pilot induced error, and we should not try to shy away from that fact. And the U.S. Army needs to start holding their pilots a little bit more accountable for violations of their rules.
I get that. All right, you're saying this is the fault of the pilot, but I'm still a
Mhm.
bit on the air traffic controller and what that other lady said about if an air traffic controller could maybe, if they were trained to give more specific instructions, like, the aircraft is at, what, like 5 o'clock or whatever, not just, do you have visual confirmation, because there are planes all
Well,
over,
it's
like for them to
so
be more specific about
I can
which plane.
understand the point of view. I can understand the point of view of a pilot trying to say, well, the air traffic controllers need to be able to give us more information.
Mhm.
Cool. That's an opinion. That doesn't matter. What matters is the fact the person who is actually controlling the vehicle is listening to one of their outside reliable sensors, and that is what an air traffic controller is. They are a form of a sensor. They are telling you about threats that are in your area. They are
Mhm.
telling you different directions to go in order to help ensure your safety. If you don't want to listen to that safety sensor, that's a you problem, and you'll pay the cost with your life. And the aviation is an occupation and an industry that has earned its weight in blood. There's all these rules and regulations that exist because someone has died because of the violation of these rules. Um, and it is sickening to try to see people trying to pass the buck for the complacency of others. And that's the way I actually see this crash.
Okay, maybe I should say, like, in a hypothetical situation, maybe not for this crash. Maybe it's a situation, if the pilot had been at the right height.
So as I said,
Or
depending on what's
just going, I guess, just going forward, maybe if they taught air traffic controllers to give more, not just like, do you see this plane, but there are like multiple
uh,
planes in the area, but
so like I but
there
like
be
I
a
said,
way to be
so
more
so
specific.
most air traffic controllers do not see the shape of the plane. They see the dot on a radar screen with
Okay.
information next to it.
Right.
They may be able to tell what direction they're heading. They may know they'll know the altitude, they'll know the speed they're traveling at and things like that. And they can see those kind of things. But to expect an air traffic controller to be able to tell you the position of another thing at a moment's notice, a relative bearing, is ridiculous to expect. It is. You
Okay.
cannot, when you're talking about something in seconds, if you're looking if I told you right now, if I asked you right now, Dawn, um, hey, there is something at your 12 o'clock, point to the direction in which it would be.
Straight in front of me.
Mm-hmm. Or is it straight above you?
Well, I would say
If
straight
I
in
said
front of
you're
me.
3 o'clock, yeah, straight in front of you, it would be the traditional but some people would also go, well, that could be also be above me. Because if you look at a clock face, 12 is up front, up top. So it depends on who they would have to have training. They would have to train what directions or what. But normally, what they would do is they would say, "Hey, they actually have programs within the radar deal where you can click on two objects,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll give you relative bearings for each thing. So if a plane is coming up from behind you, that would be 180 degrees relative. Okay, because 0 or 360 is going to be directly ahead of you. But for the aircraft behind it, it's at degree 0 or 360 relative. So they actually have programming for that, but I don't know if they have that. They have that program suite associated with that airport. Not every airport, not every air traffic control center has the same equipment due to the amount of air traffic. I would think in an area like Baltimore, Washington, they would have some of the more advanced stuff, but they're also controlling, you know, in 100 minutes, they could have 300 flights taking off and landing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of air traffic to take control of, to manage. And they usually they'll have a certain number of air controllers controlling different sectors of a corridor, and they will hand off. So you may have you'll have air traffic controllers for landing. You'll have two or three air traffic controllers for landing at a specific airfield. You'll have another couple, two or three for takeoff, and then you'll have another two or three controlling the airspace around the airport itself, and then further out, more air traffic controllers. It's a very layered system. So you will, if you ever listen to pilots talking with air traffic control, they'll tell you, you know, um, contact departure, departure frequency, blah blah blah, and then you'll start talking to them. And now they're the air traffic controllers that are over you at that very moment. And then they'll tell you switch over to frequency, blah blah blah, in order to get in touch with, you know, sector corridor 3 to Bravo, and they'll have all these different. You're constantly flipping frequencies as you travel through airspaces. That way you can talk to the relevant air traffic controller. They don't talk to each other all the time. They can't. They're too busy talking to other aircraft. That is why the pilot is ultimately the final responsible individual for the safety and well-being of that aircraft. I think it is unfair to the controller themselves, who is controlling hundreds, if not thousands, of aircraft at a single time, to place that onus on them when at the end of the day, it is the pilot who is actuating the stick, who is manipulating the throttles on the engines and things like that.
Right. I guess with the air traffic controller thing, and then also I'm talking about, maybe what people could have done differently. I don't know. Usually I try to keep this as a feel good channel. I know this isn't a feel good subject, but I
No,
was
this is
hoping, oh, well,
terrible.
like if these people do this, and then if we make some changes over here and some changes over there, like at least, we can walk away with something positive that we learned from a tragedy, like how to make things better or safer so that this doesn't happen again. I wasn't
Well,
really trying to argue with you on like what because
no,
I
no,
don't know.
no.
I don't
No,
know. I
you're
don't know what you
fine.
know.
It's a speculation issue.
Yeah.
Okay. What we do know is very sparse. So coming to true conclusive ideas at this point is really where we're kind of working against ourselves, because we don't know what we don't know yet. These are all initial reactions, and the reason why we're covering this now is because of the immediacy of when it happened. We had this crash that happened just the other night, and then last night we had yet again another crash. It happened in the Philadelphia metro area, which caused the loss of several people's houses and things like that. So you couple that with all the issues that we have seen with Boeing aircraft, and the American public opinion on aviation in America is starting to dwindle. So we are starting to see cracks within a previously very reliable system of transportation. You know, people get a little nervous, as they should. Where I would tell you, um, at any time during the day, there's probably two or three aircraft above you. You may not even see them. You may not be aware of them. Statistically, aviation is the safest mode of travel. Um, One of the problems that we see going on right now is there's a little bit of turmoil going on. Okay, especially with the the fact that we don't have private air traffic controllers. All air traffic controllers are government employees, and there's a lot of turmoil going in with the transition of power, new ideas and opinions that are coming out of the new administration. The people who are on the ground performing the job are a little nervous. They may be distracted. Although I blame the news a lot for passing out bad information. Yes, there's a hiring freeze on government employees, with the exception of air traffic controllers and DoD employees. So, but the media isn't telling you this. The media is telling you, oh, there's just a hiring freeze government wide. That's incorrect. And things that are national security or safety regulated, they're able to hire completely. It's The media helps drive a lot of the hysteria. They're looking at selling advertising revenue. They do that by getting more views to them. So covering tragedy is what they're going to do, because fear sells much better than happy.
You've actually survived a helicopter crash, isn't that correct?
Uh, okay. So one of the things that aircrew train on actually quite often is something called auto rotation. So in case of engine failure or things like that, and the aircraft can no longer stay in the air, they actually practice crashing. That is commonly known as an auto rotation, where you drop the collective to accelerate the descent of the aircraft, and at the very end, you pull up on the collective in order to help slow the descent at the very end, to where you're still going to hit kind of hard, but it's not going to kill you. This is practiced on a monthly basis. So being aircrew, you are privy to that training, and anyone who flies in a helicopter long enough is going to be involved in a crash of some sort. I have been involved in one actual crash, and it was due to mechanical failure. It really wasn't due to enemy fire or anything like that. But I mean, we've trained on this before, so it was, I would like to say, just another day at the office, but it really wasn't. I mean, it was definitely different than what we practiced before, because it wasn't in a controlled setting. There was a little bit of panic, but our training kicked in. We did what we needed to do, and we all got out of there safely with minimal damage to the aircraft, by the way.
Are you okay with telling the story in like the story version?
Well, I mean,
Did
the
you
story.
yeah, like if you're not okay with sharing that, because I know I've heard like the story version versus like the technical.
Okay. So when we had the failure, the pilot announced to the rest of the crew, "Hey, look, we're having trouble. We're going to go down." And basically, I responded with, "Hey, raise your hand if you haven't been in a helicopter crash," and we all just kind of laughed. And look, in times of crisis, humor, even bad humor, helps diffuse the situation, helps keep you focused, and really that was the concept of it. Um, you don't, when you're in an emergency, the last thing you need to do is be focused on what could be the outcome of said emergency. You just try to push through, and that's where your professionalism and your training kicks in.
Thank you. That was very informative. Once again, I can't really thank you enough for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge with the audience of Red Dawn Daily. If you would please let everybody know where they can find you online.
Yeah, so right now I am in the middle of a transitioning period. Over on YouTube and Twitch, you can find me at Less Than Three Entertainment. Less than three, if you actually put that down on your little keyboard, it makes a little cute heart emoji symbol. And yes, because we love entertainment, we are trying to change the world through culture, and we're going to do this through comedy, music, blah, blah, blah. YouTube.com/less than three entertainment, and over at twitch.tv/less than three entertainment. Rumble channel incoming, no Twitter to follow. I do appreciate it. It was nice talking to you again, Dawn. We did a live show for several years, and absolutely, I love this woman. Okay, she is amazing. She is great to work with. She is a blast, and I hope to work with her here on some future endeavors. Considering she does a little comedy, I want to utilize that resource, but I don't have anything definite in the plans. Still doing a transition. Haven't even done the artwork yet. So things are changing, and that takes a little bit of time. Takes a little bit of work on the back end. But thank you for having me on, talking about something I'm completely passionate about. I do love aviation. It's what I do on the day to day. It's a great profession to be in, to be 100% certain. But thank you for asking me to come on, give a little, and it was really funny. Was it? So the day before yesterday, Dawn Marie texted me and she goes, "Hey, what do you think about this happening over at DC?" What did I tell you, Dawn? What did I tell you?
Oh, so you said it was the pilot's fault.
Yeah, I just immediately like, if I had to hazard a guess, it's probably the helicopter pilot. And the very next day, they come out and they go, "It was a helicopter pilot." Went, "Ah, nailed it." So you do this long enough, you start to realize the most probable causes, and that's really all I did. It's not like I'm a magician on this. It's just you see enough, you start to recognize the signs. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure to come on, and I hope I was informative. And if y'all have any questions or anything, make sure to ask Dawn Marie in the description below. Okay, in the comment section, you ask her, and you know what? She has my personal phone number. If she can't get in touch with me, no one can. Okay. And I will always answer her because she's amazing. She's wonderful. Thank you for having me on, and take care, and God bless.